Hey guys, it's Solstice, the creator of the Scion Custom Races mod. This is going to be the Xayid overview video. It's been a really long time coming. Haven't released anything for quite a while, and there's still no real comprehensive guide or overview that just goes over all the Xayid units and whatnot, so I figured it's finally time to do that. Naturally, we're gonna go ahead and start off with the most basic unit. Gonna introduce Sideling here. It is the most basic combat unit for Xayid. It costs 75 minerals and has 3 range initially, 11 damage, relatively average attack speed, and we're gonna see, it has a few upgrades. One is for +1 range and the ability to attack air units. It can't do it initially. And the other upgrade is for + armor damage, so it's a bit of a different basic combat unit in that it's not actually the most ideal for engaging other lighter units. But let's see, let's get some enemy units here to smash up a bit. Still need more of these guys. Now we're going to demonstrate the Xayidling's ability real quick. It has the dash ability and it moves at a short distance. So it gives like a little bit of speed boost in a certain direction. And after using that ability, it has a bit of a quicker attack speed. So it gives it higher. It's useful for engaging. Now this is a quite unfair fight, but it shows you how that goes. Let's see, let's go ahead and get our upgrades here. The ocular acuity and piercing thrust. So now they can hit air, they have more range, and they have bonus damage versus armored. And we take a unit such as the what's her here from Genetron, which is an armored unit. They are quite a bit more effective against these guys than they would be against units which aren't armored. Unit such as Marines or Zealots and whatnot. But it pretty well summarizes the Xayidling. And the next unit in the Xayid arsenal, although that term feels a bit improper since it's not like a bunch of mech units or whatever. Anyways, the roamer is also immediately available, so it technically has the same tech level as the Xayidling, though it is more expensive. It is 75 minerals, but also 25 gas, and the roamer is more specialized towards engaging light targets, and it has a useful ability for scouting, and also the roamer is actually quite fast, quite a bit quicker than the Xayidling. Here we can just compare. The scour ability, although since the whole entire map is revealed, it kind of, you'll just have to imagine that it reveals the area. You can use it on ramps, and in that, I don't know if you can see it, there's the ring there. It'll last for a bit, and that provides vision, and it has very long range. Goes all the way out here, from all the way over there. And this missile has the unique property of actually being able to be attacked. It can be shot down, and so if you try to get vision behind enemy lines, that can be denied, or if the enemy has static defense, they can prevent you from just freely gaining vision of their base, or if they just have units at the perimeter of their bases in general. The roamer, despite being costlier, is actually more fragile than the Xayid. Sideling has 85 health and the roamer has 75. But it does have a few upgrades, one of which increases that health by 25. And the other is also a range upgrade, similar to the Xayid, except it gets more attack speed as opposed to being able to target air. We'll go ahead and get those.
Upgrade complete.
And this unit is quite good against lighter units. Zerglings not so much if they get surrounded because of they're a bit fragile. So if they're not, if they don't get a good engagement, it can go really bad for them. But against units like Marines, they actually do quite well.
This better be good.
We'll go ahead and get their combat shields and stem. It's probably a... Oh well, we'll see how this goes. Actually, I'm pretty sure the Marines are going to win this, but... They put up a pretty good fight, even though I think they're a bit low on numbers. Just throw those guys away now. And the next unit that we'll be showing is the Scorpulus. It is likewise with the roamer, geared somewhat more against being efficient against light enemies, except in a different way. It is very tanky. It has 175 health, but in addition to that, it has a base of 2 armor, which is above average. And it does have a weapon that is fairly effective against light units as well. So it's not just the armor quality. And this thing can hold out against things like Zerglings very well. And in addition to all that, it has a it injects venom into its targets when it attacks them, and that slows them down. And then they also have a movement speed upgrade. They're kind of slow. They're not like super slow, but most things could outrun these guys. But with the speed upgrade, then they become quite fast. And most things would not be able to outrun that for long. Let's see. Let's get some Zerglings here. I'll just... won't bother with the adrenal glands, but we'll just see how this goes. Zerglings are going to win, but the Scorpions are going to put up a good fight. I actually don't remember how many we started with, but get rid of those guys. Actually, I should, real quick, just show how much they actually slow down their targets. We'll grab, say, a roach. We'll give it its movement speed upgrade.
Research complete.
I'm gonna get this guy, and then we're gonna display just how much it gets slowed down. This is the roach with its movement speed upgrade. Okay, we can get that guy off. And then there. So you can see that the slow is quite effective. Alright, next unit is the meddling. This unit is a support unit. It's fairly expensive. We can see that here. 75 minerals, 125 gas, 3 supply. And just for reference, the Scorpulus is 125 minerals, 25 gas. So I forgot to mention that earlier. The meddling and the Scorpulus actually go quite well together. With the meddling, has the ability to use mend, which heals a total of 30 health over a few seconds, and it costs 15 energy. So I will note that there is a limit to the rate at which a unit can be healed. It can only be getting healed by one meddling at a time. And then an additional special ability which the meddling has is the sacrificial mutation, which basically turns it into a great big egg that heals units in an aura. Let's see, we'll get some units here real quick. Show that off. Have this meddling here, some Xayidlings, and we'll grab a High Templar with Storm,
Research complete.
and you'll see just how effective the healing is. Oh, no, no. Oh. Leave them alone for now. Okay, so you can see they're mending right now, but let's see what happens when we turn one of them into a sacrificial mutation. Seals them up pretty nicely. Now, of course, the sacrificial mutation is true to its name. The meddling does not survive the process. Dishes out its healing, and then it's done. And now the meddling does have a weapon. It's not the most effective, but it does have long range against air, so it's good for anti-air support. And of course, it is much more effective than the very measly High Templar weapon. Now we're gonna grab these meddlings here and some Scorpolisks. We'll see how well they hold out against some, let's say, roaches. That might be a few too many. Alright, we'll see how this goes. You can see that the meddlings kept the Scorpius popped up pretty well. And I think actually only one Scorpius died in that engagement. There might have actually been, so I don't know exactly how many roaches that was, but that might have been, they might have been slightly overrepresented in value. But that pretty well shows off what the meddling can do. I suppose I should display what its range against air is. We grab a few Mutalisks here. So it's pretty decent. It's almost the same as the Queen's range, but not quite. See, next unit is the Kaznalist, which is a spellcaster, and it does not have a weapon. This unit is, of course, just a support unit, and it has a few abilities: the Stagnating Bile, the Explosive Glob, and Covering Spray. And we'll display what they can do. Say we grab some siege tanks. Say a Terran has some siege tanks in this position. Take a Kaznalisk and cast its Stagnating Bile. And the Stagnating Bile, it only stuns units. It does not damage any units at all. And it also only affects ground. But it has very long range. So it has as much range as this, almost as much range as the siege tank. Just pop that off, and just, oh, he died. But you just do that, and then you can even chain it. So very effective for against siege units, such as the siege tank or moles, or basically anything that's immobile. And up next we've got the Explosive Glob, and we'll show what that does. Now, I know the knee-jerk reaction is this is way overpowered, but
Sure thing.
Oops. And that also has quite a bit of range, so you can almost think of this as an energy form of the old Disruptor, except nowhere near as much damage, only 60 damage, as opposed to 125 plus whatever amount it was versus shields. Or actually, with that form of the Disruptor, I think it's 145 damage. I don't remember. Anyways, but it can be dodged by. Oh goodness! I'll have to go grab a few more. If you catch it quick enough, you can dodge it. Like if we can put these minions here and they like, oh crap, just move out of the way. So a couple of those got caught, but if you see it coming, you can mitigate the damage, or even in some cases, you can intercept it with a single unit in order to prevent damage being taken by other units. And I understand that's basically the exact same idea as the previous Disruptor design, and I know some people didn't like that, but that's how it is for now. Now, last ability is the Covering Spray, which cloaks units for a limited duration. Initially, it's not like super long, but it's still enough to help out in clutch situations, or at least some niche situations. But it does have an upgrade which significantly increases the duration. Now this guy is cloaked. It just gets cast on a unit and it cloaks them, and you can do this to any unit except for massive units. And this will just last for a while. Next up, we got the Yoader. Now this unit is very slow, but it is also quite tanky and has a long-ranged weapon. It is primarily designed for engaging armored targets. The interesting thing about this unit is it in fact does not have an armor type. Most of the units we've seen before are either armored or light. So this makes this unit a bit kind of difficult to counter, or at least to counter in a specific sense. With this unit, it can withstand siege tank fire pretty well. It can also range siege tanks if they can get close enough with their long range, so it's a fair bit easier than with most units. This allows this unit, with its tankiness, it can afford to be on the front lines and to be able to snipe priority targets on the back of enemy lines. And one property of its weapon is that any units that it strikes will have reduced damage for a brief amount of time. And let's see, next up we got revilers. I should note that the yoaders can only target ground. Revilers on the other hand can target air and ground. And all the units we've looked over so far are produced from the basic production structure, which is Xayid, which is just a basic thing here. But with the units we're getting into now, you have to make a higher tech structure in order to get them. So the reviler is armored, not the most tanky unit. It's not as tanky as the yoader, but it does have quite a bit higher DPS, but it doesn't have any kind of armor bonus. has an upgrade which makes it so that when it attacks, it will progressively attack faster and faster up to a certain amount. You can tell that it's getting faster and faster there. And then after a certain amount of time, that'll just wear off if it's not attacking for a certain amount of time. Now let's grab some units here. Just get a mix of bio or something.
This better be good.
And we'll get some more units in there. Got these guys a tank in the front. See how well this goes. Okay, that wasn't quite enough cover, but with that much time, the revilers are all at their maximum attack speed, and they have quite a high DPS. Oh, some of these guys weren't engaged.
First round's on me.
So the reviler, you kind of want to keep it with cover. If it doesn't have cover, it's not the most durable unit, and so especially if they have like anti-armor units like stalkers or marauders, they'll go down pretty quick. But with cover, they're very effective at dealing damage. We have another not a direct combat unit, the Prowler. And this thing doesn't have any weapons or anything like that. It does have a couple abilities though. One of them is to place acid nests, as they're called, which are basically like baneling mines. One slight difference though is that with baneling mines you cannot see any indication on the ground, but with these you can see a slight one. Although it'll be difficult to see because the acid nest model will be showing up. So you can like put a bunch of them here, and they do have a cost. It's not free. They cost 10 Merils and 10 Vespine. And with detection, you can just kill them, and then they're effectively worthless. Except for when they have their upgrade. This upgrade does is that we'll have to get these guys some detection real quick. So you can just kill the mines with some protection, but due to the upgrade, the acid nests still are a bit of a threat because they create big pools of acid when they die, which deals damage and slows enemies in its area, and that lasts for a little while. So it's area denial, alive, dead or alive, with its upgrade. And then one other thing that the Prowler has, it's quite quick, and it's kind of designed to be able to roam the map freely. And so it has a defensive ability called Blinding Burst, which can be used against any units which are out and about trying to remove it. Just uses Blinding Burst, and then they can still move, but they can't use any abilities or weapons. And it also restricts their vision. So basically the ability designed to let it be used on enemies that are trying to kill the Prowler. It just uses the Blinding Burst on them, disables them, and runs away. And if they don't have any units which weren't affected, they won't be able to see where it goes afterwards.
Go on.
Next up we have the Spitter, which is a siege / area effect damage unit. And a unique property for the Spitter is that its weapon is not guided, as in it will hit a point, it will not target a specific unit in the missile, have the missile track it. It's unguided. Kind of like the Burst of Bile, except it's its actual weapon. So if I take this guy and have him patrol, even though it's using its weapon to target it, it generally won't hit it because it just walks away from where it was. Now with the Spitters, to help with this, they can choose a specific point on the ground to attack, similarly to an ability. So it just makes it so they fire their weapon constantly at a point. So you can use this to gauge where enemies will be at. And so you can negate the effect of the unguided missiles, and you just predict where the enemies will be, and that will be more useful for hitting enemies which aren't tightly packed. You can also use it just as general area denial, where basically you can just sit here and have them do that, and an army's gonna have a hard time breaking that, engaging into that angle, so they have to find some other way to engage. Now that's without the range upgrade. Without the range upgrade, it's 8 range, but with their range upgrade, they go up to 11. Yeah, it goes up to 11, which is not quite as far as the siege tank. So siege tanks still fairly comfortably outrange it, but it is still very large range. Oh, and one thing to note is, yes, it does deal friendly damage, so you have to be very careful with it if you're getting attacked by any melee units, such as Zerglings or Scorpilisks or whatever. Okay, so up until this point, all these units which are made from the biomass hatchery do not require any tech, but the Mascots does require a tech building. And of course, several of the Xayid units require tech buildings as well. But with the Mascots here, it's the largest ground unit which Xayid has. And it is pretty big. It's quite comparable to an Ultralisk in durability. It has a base of 3 armor, though it doesn't have any armor upgrade like the Ultralisk does. And has a weapon against ground, which deals a fair bit of damage, does some splash, it's not full. It has low range, but it's not melee range like an Ultralisk. The thing about the Mascots, though, is that they have this hunker ability, when that causes them to root into the ground, and then they can target air units. This must be researched, so you can't just get it right off the bat. And a unique property of the Mascots when it's hunkered is that it is regarded as a structure. This has several implications. Many spells cannot target it, and some weapons can't, such as the Liberator. I guess that's actually the only weapon that wouldn't be able to attack it, or that it normally would otherwise. This does have one drawback I can actually think of, which is that banelings deal massive amounts of damage to them as a side effect if they're hunkered. I'll just show that right now. Doesn't take very many. So yeah, they deal quite a lot of damage to hunkered Mascots due to their structure tag. They do actually have increased armor and a bit more health when they're hunkered, so they're actually quite a bit more durable. And they also have higher health regeneration when they're hunkered as well. And that'll be kicking in a moment there. You can see it's regenerating pretty quickly. Its air weapon has 10 range, and that it's not outranged by most things, especially since the Tempest doesn't have quite as much range versus ground anymore. I'm actually not sure if there are any air units that have air-to-ground attacks which outrange this. But with the high durability and armor, and it actually does have some splash with its anti-air as well, it's fairly effective against things like carriers or mutalisks, which have low damage attacks that can't very easily get through the armor. And I think that's about it for the Mascots. Let's suppose maybe we could show it off in combat a little bit more. So yeah, it's pretty good against things like Zerglings. Now, of course, banelings won't deal that extra damage to them if they're not hungered. So they're not quite as effective then. You can see some of that splash kicking in there. One last biomass hatchery unit is actually an air unit, so it's kind of like the robotics facility in that it has both air and ground units that it can construct. The Farion is a transport unit which is created from the biomass hatchery, and it also serves a dual role as a detector. It's fairly quick, has a fair bit of durability, but it doesn't have anything like the medevacs, like healing or boost. It can't load units at range or whatever. But it works quite well. One slight thing about that is that you can get it for detection, but if you don't have enough, and you like send one off to do a drop or something, if you don't have any extra ones, you could end up in a spot where you thought you had detection, but you actually don't because it's off on a drop. So that's one thing to consider when using those units. Okay, moving on to units from the dedicated air production structure. We've got the Raptor, and this thing is, individually speaking, the cheapest air combat unit in the game, if I recall correctly. 2 hatches out of 1 egg though. 1 egg costs 75 minerals, 75 gas, or I mean 150 minerals, 150 gas. And since there are 2 that come out, each individual Raptor is 75 minerals and 75 gas. Has not the most impressive damage, and its durability isn't striking. It's a bit better cost ratio than Mutalisks, but you have to be careful with this thing because they can pack pretty tight, so Splash is especially effective against these guys. The Raptor is the fastest air unit. It is faster than the Phoenix, and the only thing that is faster than it in the game would be Zerglings that have speed. Raptor does have one upgrade, the Cleaving Spores, which is very, very important if you want to use these guys. It massively increases their effectiveness. It makes it so they deal 3 + 5 versus armored more damage to units per attack, basically. But this damage is applied over time as opposed to instantly. And so and it also doesn't apply to structures. So basically, it's just, it allows it to be quite effective against units, but not quite as much against structures. I could see this thing otherwise being quite possibly the worst base wrecker that there is in the game. Yeah, quite effective against armored units if they can get in range. They don't have the most impressive range, it's just 5. So that concludes that unit. Details, okay. And then we've got the Assailant, which is quite comparable to the Banshee, except that it doesn't have any cloak and is more durable. It actually costs a bit more than a Banshee. This unit has 4 attacks per volley, and it so this makes it so that it's heavily affected by armor. So even though it doesn't have any armor bonuses, it will generally not be as good against higher armored units. One side effect of this is that it is very effective for attack upgrade timings. It gets +4 damage per volley quite nice. Let's see, let's get some units here. So this unit is quite comparable to the Banshee in combat, except it's a bit more durable. So it's more useful in straight up combat, but it's not as useful in harass situations. All those guys are engaging at the same time. But yeah, fairly average speed for an air unit as well. Not super impressive, but... Moving on, we've got the Exterminator. This unit is more of a dedicated anti-light unit. It deals splash damage. So very effective against the Raptors, for example. It is not like super tanky. It's pretty average in health. Speed is quite similar to Corruptors. It does have one ability though. And this ability allows it to... It can be used on air or ground. And what this ability does, it's similar in concept to Parasitic Bomb, although not quite as devastating. So just split off the units to prevent damage. It doesn't last as long or deal as much damage as Parasitic Bomb, but it's quite similar in concept. Let's grab some air units real quick. Like some Mutalisks here. Now, they're just going to be Dumbos, and they're going to be really packed up, because that's what people playing with Mutalisks do. Oops, I didn't know. And that splash is quite effective. But real quick, I'm gonna... And you can of course use this ability on air units as well. And you just separate them out to mitigate the damage. And it does have quite a lengthy cooldown. So it's not like you can use it more than once per engagement per Exterminator. At least not usually, unless it's a really extended engagement. Let's see, next up we have a air unit caster. No weapons, of course, it's just a support unit. And this weapon, or this unit, it does not have any damaging spells. It is purely support. And has the ability to use Adaptive Injection, which can be cast on either friendly or enemy units, though the effects differ. But if it's cast on a friendly unit gains more attack speed. You can tell with the green stuff coming out of that, although it's a bit bugged. I'll grab a unit where you can see it a little easier. There we go. So you can see that effect there, which means he has faster attack speed and also more range. They get more range while they have that ability on them. And the effect is precisely the opposite when used against ground units. They will have a slower attack speed and less range. Except that didn't work for some reason. Have a bug to work out, I guess. Let's see, try that one more time. Oh, for some reason it worked that time, okay. You can see that he has less range, and attacks quite a bit slower. And then the effect wears off. After that, it has one other ability, the Protective Cloud, which can be used on which is just used on the ground, and it lasts there for a while. And any unit which is standing in it will take less damage from any damage source. And that includes weapon damage, range and melee, splash, spell damage, you name it. For example, let's see, let's get a, say, Disruptor.
Consciousness awakened.
Deals 145 damage. And the Reviler has 145 health. So ordinarily, it'll just die if it's hit. But, get this guy over here. Cast this protective cloud.
Speak and be
This is
heard.
finished. We'll fire it again.
Your demands. Presiding.
And he survives. So it is quite useful for mitigating any kind of spell damage, especially area of effect. And one final thing is that there's an upgrade for it, which increases the duration of its abilities
Upgrade complete.
by quite a bit. So you remember how long it lasted before, it'll last for quite a bit longer now. Although it did kind of cheat the last time I cast it again. Just have to imagine. It lasted for quite a while. And then this will also last for a longer duration as well. The final unit we're going to be looking at is the Kraken, which is the great big, I guess you could say, capital class unit. It is quite comparable to the battlecruiser in its scale. Has the same health, the same cost, though its weapons and abilities differ somewhat. The weapon is not like a really fast attack speed weapon. It's slower, though it does have multiple attacks. And it also has longer range than the battlecruiser with its basic weapon. And it also actually scales quite a bit better with upgrades as well, due to its higher damage values. It benefits greater amount from upgrades. Now its ability, which must be researched, is the Volatile Discharge. This is again an ability which costs resources to use. It's not free. The cost is actually pretty close to that of a nuke. And it has a similar effect as well. So it places that on the ground, and enemies can attack that, but after a certain amount of time, it explodes and deals quite a hefty amount of damage, 200. And so, depending on what you have, you either use all your firepower to destroy it before it explodes, in which case it does no damage, or you back off and get out of its area, which isn't as great as the nuke. It's fairly easy to just run out of, except in the case you have like slower units like siege tanks. If they're already sieged up or something, you have to be pretty quick on that. But overall, it is useful for breaking sieges and whatnot. If you place several, and then you can either make them waste their DPS on the volatile discharges, or you can force them to back off from position. You can also use it to prevent chasing or whatnot. Overall, rather tactical in its use. Or maybe I should say strategic. I don't know. But that covers all the units. I suppose perhaps I will want to kind of go over the properties of some of the buildings. Feeding pools are the supply structure, and they have the property of being similar to a meddling in that they provide healing to units, although it's not unlimited, and it can only stack. It can stack up to a certain point. Like if we take this guy's health down a bit, you can see he's getting healing from the feeding pool, not the meddling here. It'll only heal up to a certain point. It can stack a few times, but only a few times. And that's just a defensive property of the feeding pool. And the static defense, which can target air and ground similar to a photon cannon, must be placed within a certain range of these feeding pools, similar to power with Protoss. So you can't just freely cannon rush except without needing pylons. So of course you have to maintain the worker in the construction, so it still probably won't be as powerful, but still. And of course, if there are no feeding pools near the battle pit, it will eventually die, similar to Zerg buildings. And all the production structures for Xayid use larvae, except of course for the scavenger nest, which just has a normal train queue. Which the only thing it can do is, all it does is make workers. But with the other production structures, they use larvae. So these larvae can only make specific units in a of their like tech range or whatever you want to call it. So it only makes a certain subset of units, which are separate, kind of like barracks and factories and starports. And I believe that covers everything. Get all the upgrades, and let's gather all the units up. Have a great big battle to finish things off. And because we can, we're just gonna make them fight a bunch of motherships, because why not?
Our allies are being attacked.
Well, motherships are not very good with combat. Who knew?